So welcome. Today we are at Sibelius Academy and we have nice guests.
So, Alexei, could you maybe say something about the current state of experimental music in Russia?
It's a bit complicated question, and I will try to answer. We have maybe two main scenes of experimental music in Russia. It's Moscow and Petersburg, and a little bit in smaller cities like Nizhny Novgorod, Smolensk, Yekaterinburg, Yaroslavl. But of course the main scenes are Petersburg and Moscow, and both are quite well developed to my mind. We have quite many different musicians, projects, bands. It's possible to say, it's possible to talk about electronic music as well as free improvised, and it could be some combinations between electronic musicians and improvisers. Petersburg is pretty the same, and we have a couple of nice venues in Moscow and Petersburg. Dome Cultural Center in Moscow and Gallery of Experimental Sounds in Petersburg. Of course, it's not enough for us, for musicians. Of course, we're always thinking about different new places, new spaces, and we try to collaborate with different clubs, galleries, but still we have some possibilities to perform. And also I can say that we have, our experimental scene is quite mixed, so it could be some people from older generation, like me or Pavel Zhagun, my former colleague from Fruits duo, as well as Andrei Smirnov, the chief of Moscow Theremin Center, and some other veterans of experimental music and sound art in Moscow. In Petersburg, it could be mentioned Nick Sudnik, the leader of SGA project. SGA maybe is one of the first industrial free improvised projects. Appeared first in Riga, then Nick moved to Petersburg, and this project is still active, and Nick is active by himself, as well as Alexei Plusmin, the musician, guitarist. He was quite active in Moscow in the 80s, played with some rock bands, but later he moved to Petersburg and started to play something more experimental, more improvised. He's also curator of a festival taking place in Petersburg.
He was also here two seasons ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's quite active organizer in Petersburg. Because in Moscow we also have some nice promoters, true enthusiasts of experimental music, and one of them is Kirill Polonsky. His specialization is modern free jazz, and he invites many Scandinavian musicians like Paul Nilsson Love, the drummer, Mats Gustafsson, saxophonist from Sweden, Ken Vandermark, but he's American guy, but it's this guy, Kirill, he's responsible mostly for such kind of music as contemporary free jazz, which is very intensive, extreme, sometimes even more than rock music, and it's a pretty popular style of music now in Moscow and Petersburg.
I should add that Alex is also enthusiast and organizer, and not only musician and sound artist, as well as an organizer and has a festival which takes place every summer for Noise and Fury. And I can say, yeah, it's old generation and young generation, all kinds of music which exist in the world. You can imagine also has, we have it in Russia, and it's in every city and every state. And as well, there is a kind of this separation between educated and non-educated musicians, which are a bit separated from each other. So we have also academic scene of experimental music as well, of composed music, and as well partly improvised, which is now, but we don't have a really big scene in these people, and they're also a bit separated. So Alexei works with
Dom Cultural Center is a basis for the combination of educated musicians and composed music and improvised music. Yes, ensemble of Pekarsky, it's percussion instruments only, of course, mostly professional and educated musicians are taking part in this ensemble.
The most active, I think, performers who are
yeah, but they are not improvisers, they play composed music.
Yeah, but I can say modern composition is actually partly improvised. There is somehow, you have to, because this kind of notes you have to.
It sounds a bit like an improvisation.
yeah, but as I know, because there is partly some kind of improvisation, as I know, as I played it. So I can say that it's only, there is some educated musicians like Sergei Letov. Really
he's veteran of improvised music in Russia, and Sergei plays saxophones, flutes, different wind, brass instruments.
All over the world and play all kinds of music, from commercial until really experimental.
Not commercial, maybe it's difficult to say, but he played with some popular rock bands in Russia, like Aquarium from Petersburg or DDT.
And his
another quite
was a punk legend. Was a punk legend. He died, and he was a real big person for Russia.
And yes, his brother was a leader of civil defense band, and Sergei played a few years with this band. It's not his type of music. I mean, it's more like punk, rock, or something like this. A little bit of noise and a bit of experimental, but it's more like, let's say, traditional punk rock music. But Sergei, being an improviser and very flexible musician, he played with this band for some time. But at the same time, he was a regular member of Pop Mechanics, the group organized by Sergei Kuryokin, the legendary avant-gardist from Petersburg. And his Pop Mechanics was quite famous project in the 80s. And
it's kind of friends up of Russia.
It's more maybe it's Pop Mechanics. It was more like a performance group. Of course, Kuryokin was a very skillful piano player, and he played jazz, free jazz in Petersburg with local musicians. But at the same time, he worked with some rock bands like Aquarium, the same as Letov collaborated with. But at the same time, Kuryokin invited different rock musicians to his project. It could be free improvisers, electronic people, people from academic scene, some professional singers or musicians. It could be also circus, some brass ensembles. It could be some artists taking place in this project. Animals, birds, everything was included. It was some sort of a happening, but quite carefully directed, structured by Kuryokin himself. And so this project is still famous. because many musicians taking part in pop mechanics, and of course some of them try to reproduce somehow the ideas of Kuryokhin he introduced to local experimental scene. At the same time, Kuryokhin was quite well known abroad. He released some records with different musicians in England, United States, Japan, and he traveled a little bit with pop mechanics also, and he played in Finland. I think it's Anton Nikila, my collaborator. He was maybe the first foreign promoter invited Kuryokhin to play abroad, and Sergei Letov as well. And I think it was like a combination of Kuryokhin, Letov, and another artist from Moscow. His name is German Vinogradov. He's also musician, painter, performer, and he works a lot with metal constructions, with industrial aesthetics. And Anton invited them in '87 to perform in Finland, and I think it was maybe the first experience of these musicians performing abroad. So Anton was some sort of a pioneer in introducing Russian or Soviet musicians for Western or international audience.
And we still have a festival in St. Petersburg of Sergei Kuryokhin.
Skiff festival.
And where many experimental musicians also.
Yeah, and it's quite big, maybe the biggest international festival of such kind, and very different musicians from different countries performed there, and it could be bands like Faust, German krautrock band, it could be industrial rockers, Swans from California, different noise musicians like Keiki Null from Japan, and Zenigeva, it's another project of him, Peter Brodsman at the same time, and very different people. It could be electronic musicians, rock bands, DJs, and now the crew of Skiff Festival is organizing two other festivals, electromechanics and ethnomechanics. And it's like, I took part at Skiff Festival many times, and I played at ethnomechanics with Volga project, Volga band, and taken part. And it's like electronic music festival and ethno music festival. But of course the program could be quite mixed, because ethno, I mean, it doesn't mean that it's pure folklore or traditional musicians. It could be different combinations and mixtures of different types of music. The same as electromechanics. It's not only techno or drum and bass. It could be a bit of experimental electronics, or it could be projects based on electronic sounds, but in combination with acoustic instruments or something like that. So, but in this kind of activity, Petersburg has some advantage. I mean, it's the real center of international activity of experimental music. Moscow is maybe less. Of course, we have a lot of different events in Moscow, but we are a bit limited by possibilities. Of course, Dom Cultural Center is the most active organization, because we have different festivals taking place there. It could be Long Arms Festival. It's also connected to Sergei Kuryokhin, who was the founder of Long Arms Records. And his partner, collaborator from Dom, the founder of Dom, Nik Dmitriev, he was some sort of a manager of Sergei Kuryokhin, and they both organized different events together. So Nik, he was like a promoter, organizer, journalist, and Kuryokhin was active musician and organizer at the same time. And they both organized different events in the 80s, 90s, but unfortunately both died already. Kuryokhin died in 95 or 96, and Nick Dmitriev died in 2004. So yeah, these two people have been quite active in the field of just organization of different events. And of course, the wife of Nick Dmitriev, Lyudmila Dmitrieva, she is responsible for the festival called Long Arms. So I'm an organizer of Noise and Fury Festival, and some other people like Dmitry Vasilyev, the chief of Monochrome Vision label. He is also quite active organizer and promoter, and he invites mostly electronic or like musicians, sound artists from different countries, as well as Kurt Lidward, the chief of Microtone Records. He's also label manager, and now he started to invite musicians from different countries to
he's
perform.
mostly producing, and all of these people are mostly, or let's say, inviting or producing music of foreigners. It's not development.
Yeah, but of course it could be some collaborations between.
Yeah, but Alexei mostly he invites, not mostly, but also partly maybe Russian bands, maybe Russian band musicians, and as well so experimental. Again, that all of these people who organize mostly there is no any foundation, any support, and it's mostly enthusiasts, and also all musicians who make such kind of music with education or without. It's also some let's say like hobby or activity, and
yes, we don't have much funding in Russia, but at the same time Skiff Festival has some support from the city. In Moscow it's a bit more complicated situation, but of course we collaborate with different international foundations and embassies sometimes.
Which is again like supporting.
And some foreign musicians come to Russia at their own expense, for example, which is not so extremely expensive, especially if you live in Europe, or Berlin, or Helsinki, or
you even can
Paris. It's of course it's not the same like to invite people from the States or Japan, but it's possible to organize somehow. And of course we have some young activists, enthusiasts, organizers like Yegor Gusev, for example. He's also inviting many foreign musicians to perform in Russia, and sometimes he invites local musicians to support foreign guests. And this kind of activity is quite well developed now in Moscow and Petersburg. And in our case, when I organize something by myself, or when I collaborate with Dmitry Vasilyev or Kurt Lidward, for example, or with Ilya Belarukov, a young saxophonist from Petersburg, we try to organize some tours, some concerts in the other cities, mostly in Yaroslavl, which is not so far from Moscow. It takes 4 hours by train, which is not so far. And we have a small group of people there, real enthusiasts, good friends of us, and they have some possibilities to organize concerts in small venues. It could be some private galleries, it could be even some office spaces. It could be designers' studio, for example, and people give possibility to organize something. way.
Yeah, the guy he works in local government, and he even sometimes
But
it's really nice combination.
He works mostly in public relations department. He's not a real like decision maker. He's not a politician, of course. But of course, and some other people with whom he's collaborating, they work sometimes in local Ministry of Culture. Of course, they know situation, they know cultural situation in the city, and sometimes they could get even some small support from local cultural organizations. But usually, and most of the time, we organize it on a private level. And which is easier to organize, and it works better most of the time. And this kind of activity is quite well developed, and we brought very different musicians to Yaroslav, including Thomas Buckner, Phil Niblek, Pansonic, and Dave Phillips, Anton Nikila, as well, Francisco Lopez, and of course we couldn't bring there big groups, big ensembles, and but in case of smaller projects or in case of electronic musicians, it's quite easy to organize.
So I want to say that in case of education of such kind, because we are in Sibelius Academy now, I didn't study music like professionally, let's say, or
you study a little bit.
Just, but what I found out that what I know that it's a bit, we don't have, you cannot study even partly experimental music or modern music. Mostly it's based everywhere in classical jazz standards and so. So in this case we don't have educated musicians also in this kind of music, but at the same time we have an interest. And the problem in Russia is that it's too big. Let's say it's so big that people from other big cities which are placed like you have to fly very. It's too far to go with the train. They also have interest, but they just cannot collect money to bring musicians also to showcases, and unfortunately here in Vladivostok even, so you can find everywhere people who are interested and who is always glad and really happy to see and to know more. Because we still have a bit, even nowadays where we have internet and everything possible to find in Russia, many people don't know everything. If you are from a small city, it's impossible to come.
Yes, there is some activity taking place in Yekaterinburg or Novosibirsk, for example. Sometimes it could be Krasnoyarsk, which is like south west of Siberia, which is quite far from Moscow. Norilsk depends on, it's more like industrial city, not far from the North Pole. But cities like Nizhny Novgorod, Petrozavodsk, for example, Volgograd.
They're really far. I mean, it's really big distance.
But Chebaksary, it's not extremely far. It takes maybe one night
or one day
by train, or 12 hours. 16 hours, 24 hours. But
most musicians,
of course, if you go to Far East, it takes, if you go by train, it takes 2-3 days, or quite a long flight and very expensive. The same price as to fly to United States, for example, which is a bit problematic for local musicians, unfortunately, and it's. But the transportation and logistics quite expensive in Russia, and it could be a problem for local musicians
to travel. It's not so expensive than in Europe, but it's not so good organized. You have different possibilities, and you can find cheap flights. It's mostly not possible. And maybe only pop bands, pop bands can travel.
Rock bands or some pop musicians, they can travel, but using some buses, or it could be private bus, for example, rented by a rock band.
How did you travel? Because Alexei took
No,
part
I travel mostly by trains and planes.
Yeah.
And it could be local transportation, it could be some private cars or buses, local trains. But in my case, it wasn't so complicated. And I traveled a bit with my band, Nochnoy Prospect. And
one of the first new wave band in Russia, in the Soviet Union. We started at that time when rock was forbidden. And it was interesting because it was totally underground. At the same time, they were playing in...
Yeah, but we started to travel a bit later when Perestroika started. After it was, so our first tour or first concert in other city took place in '86. And since that time we started to travel, and we played even in Vladivostok. And played 5 concerts there, because there was no reason to go there to play only one show. So, but everywhere we had and still have local enthusiasts. They try to find money, they try to organize something. And now it's in case of rock music, it's like this network is quite well developed now, so it's possible to travel and to perform. There are many rock clubs, special venues for rock music and for traditional jazz as well. So it's possible to travel somehow. But in case of experimental music, it's much more complicated. Of course,
audience is much smaller.
Yeah, it takes time, some efforts, money to organize it, and the audience are not so educated, not so prepared. But for us, it's even more interesting to play for, like how to say, it's like fresh listeners. They don't know anything, don't know much about avant-garde, experimental music, noise, or free improvisation. They heard maybe some names, or of course they could have some impression of how it looks like. But it's interesting to play for people being not specialists in this kind of music. Of course, we don't select audiences. Everybody are invited somehow, but it's nice to play in the provinces somehow, because it's the reaction is much more
unexpected.
Yeah, of course, there could be some unexpected situations, because people are quite expressive.
Yeah. It's normally in Russia to express.
They could be more impressed somehow, and of course some discussions could take place after. And we had such kind of practice in the 80s when we played our experimental rock music, and it was like the concert was some sort of a meeting with the audience, so we could play 20, 30, 40 minutes, and after 2 hours of discussion, and people asked different questions, and it was quite it's organized in quite
kind of why did you play this music?
No, it wasn't programmed somehow, and people that nobody forced people to ask questions, and nobody asked us. It wasn't part of contract that you should talk to the audience, but sometimes it could be organized like something between concert and press conference, but the communication with the audience was very interesting, very nice. Some people could be quite aggressive, negative to us, and
mostly it was written by questions was written in a paper, and you get a paper. And you
Yeah, it
know
could be some papers we got from
you
the
are
audience.
crazy or insane.
Yeah, but yeah, some people asked us to explain what does it mean, what could be the credo of our band, for example, or what would we like to say with this kind of music they never heard before, and its reaction could be quite aggressive somehow, quite unpredictable. People could be hostile a little bit, but not everybody, of course. And,
but interesting that so Alexei's
the
colleague.
audience split up usually. There will be nobody stayed neutral. So it was a bit of like cultural conflict or clash.
But fortunately, Alexei's colleague was a philosopher.
Yeah,
Alexei is historic. They can talk a lot, explaining from all.
Yeah, for us it was a good practice. It was a part of our academic activity, and it was funny. It was funny, and just yes, my partner, he was a philosopher. He also studied at Moscow State University, and he studied some religious philosophy of Russia from the 19th century, and he also specialized in Dostoevsky philosophy, and not only, and of course we got some new, fresh information from the West. It could be music, literature. In the 80s it was possible already to watch videos somehow, and sometimes we even brought some videos, some music, and organized some sort of showcase. A bit of like we do it now. It could be VHS player, TV. We can bring cassettes with us. It could be industrial, experimental, avant-garde music of like academic avant-garde, like Stockhausen, Cage. It could be Sonic Youth and Swans, The Residents. Just everything we could get by ourselves.
Only the difference that there was much of audience, there was interest, yeah?
Yes,
tension.
of course.
There was
Of
no
course.
information.
It was usually,
tension.
and it was even more popular than concerts, because when we played concerts, people had to pay for the entrance, and they didn't have maybe impression of what kind of music it could be. But when just we organized some sort of workshops, showcases, and it was mostly for free, and of course all local, it was organized mostly for local musicians, journalists, fans of experimental music, and it was very, very nice experience. It wasn't, it was not so easy to organize everywhere, but in some cities where people could have some so-called youth centers, for example, or it could be some youth cafe or a special place where people can meet each other. And of course, mostly it wasn't so promoted, not so publicly promoted, and it was organized mostly for local activists, so-called activists and enthusiasts. But it was nice experience.
It's about the past, and what about now?
Oh, of course, now people have a lot of information.
Nobody needs anything. You can say.
Yes, but in some provincial cities, it's quite still we have such kind of experience. It could be, for example, any local record shop. And they could organize some sort of a meeting of musicians and the audience. And it's also a good possibility to promote the releases we can bring with us. It could be, we can even sell some CDs, some records. and it's also part of promotion of the concert or any event we are taking part, especially in case Sergei Letov and myself, we work together quite often, playing live soundtracks for silent movies. It's quite well developed activity in Russia. Not everybody can do it, but some group of musicians work a lot with silent movies. And myself and Sergei Letov, the saxophonist, we are some sort of veterans of such kind of activity. And we travel quite a lot, mostly performing our live soundtracks for silent movies. And it could be quite good organized events, and local people, they could invite some local press. It could be young journalists from newspapers, from the radio, from local TV stations. And it could be organized on a quite professional level. And of course people invest some money there, and of course they need a promotion. They would like to make some propaganda of it's a place. It could be local art centers, for example, museums, and some local theaters, and some specialized places. And of course they are interested to promote the event somehow, and they invite local press people, and not only, and it could be sometimes nice talks with the audience, with local journalists.
Yeah, it's always good when it's possible to talk, to just because then it looks like yeah, people understand them more, musician, and then they understand more music.
Yeah, in case of silent movies, we introduce the movie. First of all, because not everybody knows. Of course, it could be some classical films like Metropolis of Fritz Lang, for example. But Faust of Friedrich Murnau, the film I worked with for many years, is less known.
Or
Dziga Vertov, people heard of him somehow, and they could know some names, but they don't know exactly what does it mean. Mm-hmm. Who is Dziga Vertov? What kind of films he produced? And of course, we talk a lot about the history of any film, the background, and a little bit about music. But of course it's difficult to explain music, but we can show people that we use some electronics, so some laptops, saxophone, and because they sometimes audience could be a bit surprised when they see no instruments on stage. Mm-hmm. And even Sergei, he plays. He could bring a couple of saxophones with him, or with the flute, or bass, clarinet. MIDI. But he also uses some MIDI instruments, and also some electronics, laptop. And of course, it's sometimes it's better to introduce it somehow to the audience. Sure. And it works somehow. So this some part of activity of local experimental musicians.
Yeah, as experimental and also
soundtracks for silent movies.
And for the end, maybe I can say that there is a new movie, Electro Moskva, which is shooted by our friends.
It's not a movie, it's a documentary.
Documentary, yes, it's true. And the friends of us, who are Елена Тихонова and Dominic Spritzendorfer, they are from Austria, but they make it everything in Moscow. They shoot it in Moscow. And
they did some research, and it took maybe 10 years to make this documentary, and it's not available in the internet now, because it's quite new a film, and they have to show it mostly at different international film festivals, and because they have some obligations, and it's they have a producer, and they should return some money they spent to make this film, and I hope that it will be shown in Helsinki as well.
Yeah,
Helsinki is quite well-known center of documentary and experimental films, and now we'll have a meeting with Mika Taimela, who is a quite big specialist. He's a filmmaker by himself, and he's organizer, also curator of. He was a curator of a film program at Amato Festival, and this program was quite unique. Maybe it was very serious part of this festival, and a very good selection of films from different countries, and we hope that it will be possible to show this documentary in Finland.
Yeah, because
to represent it somehow.
Yeah, because in the film also there is some representation of modern situation in Moscow.
Some history of electronic music.
And some about Theremin, his last videos.
Last interview of Leon Theremin, and some Andrei Smirnov is also represented in this movie.
The first synthesizer is combined visual and audio.
It's not a synthesizer. Somehow it's like proto synthesizer constructed by Yevgeny Murzin in the 50s, 60s.
Which tried
it's A and S. Abbreviation is Alexander Nikolaevich Skrябin. And Skrябin, he was like inventor of but the idea was to combine sound and light. And this ANS, it's also a combination of light and sound, and painting also.
So it's interesting, and one of our first rehearse and
ASTMA was also represented.
2009, when we started to play, also represented and Alexei's father even.
He's not a musician, but he worked in the computer center of Moscow University. I've been there many times, being a school boy.
Great, thank you very much.
We can talk a lot.